Hello, everyone. I'm Margaret Scott. I'm one of the founders of the New York Southeast Asia Network that is sponsoring today's very exciting event. I'm very happy this worked out. Dédé Oetomo is known to everybody in this room, and we are here to celebrate his life and scholarship as an activist and a scholar. I'm going to say a few words about him, and then we also are very lucky to have such a distinguished person in Gina to help us have a conversation with Dede. But before that, I just want to say that the New York Southeast Asia Network would love everybody to become a member. And we have a lot of very important events coming up. And I'm going to tell you a few of them. If that email came through, yes, it did. So on the 24th of February, Merlina Lim, who has just published a book on social media and politics in Southeast Asia, and I believe you were the editor of the series, Meredith Weiss is here. And so that'll be a book talk at either 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And then on March 11th, one of my favorite scholars on Southeast Asia, Talmo Jo, is going to be speaking about a project in progress. She wrote a book that got a lot of awards, and so she's going to be speaking on the 11th of March on the sort of feminism and the third world post-Bandung. She was exiled after 65. She's Indonesian, the person she's writing about. It's a very interesting topic. And I have to talk to you, Riane, about that. And then on the 25th of March, Walden Bello, who everybody knows, a very important Filipino scholar and activist, is going to be talking about his memoir. And then on the 27th of March, there's going to be a conference up at Columbia on what Trump's victory means for Southeast Asia. And then in April, we are going to be hosting a book talk for Ane's new book, which is extremely interesting. Hi, Emery. But now to today. I had the pleasure of attending a conference yesterday with Dede in Washington, which was about the Chinese in Southeast Asia, the diaspora Chinese. And it was very interesting. And Dede not only is a very important activist on gay rights, queer rights, LGBT rights in Indonesia, he's also an important scholar. And one of the important things to know about Dede is that his early research, his PhD is from Cornell, really heralded, highlighted, and became a landmark work on the way Indonesian Chinese in Indonesia helped create the national language, which is extremely important in understanding how Indonesia has evolved the way it has, that it has a Bahasa Indonesia that is shared throughout the archipelago. And Dede's work highlights the role of Chinese Indonesians in the creation of that language, which is, we're all thankful for that. And at Cornell, he was a student of Ben Anderson's, and he also joined what we call affinity groups now for gay students in none other than Daniel Berrigan's office, as Daniel Berrigan was the chaplain of Cornell at the time. Just a fun fact I learned hanging out with Dede.
That was the 60s. By the time I joined the group, Father Berrigan was not there.
Okay. The Ben Anderson influence on Dede will Gina has already highlighted that it's something that interests him, so we will discuss that. But while he was at Cornell, Dede came out, and then he went back to Indonesia, and he's done many, many things on getting protection for HIV and AIDS. He founded some very important groups. One still exists, Gaia Nusantara Foundation. And the name Nusantara is important, and Dede will tell you why he chose that. And he's involved in just about everything that moves. He was actually a pillar in a very landmark 2016 Human Rights Watch report that was done, that Dede worked very closely with Human Rights Watch on that. He's an adjunct senior lecturer at Erlangen in Surabaya, and he also teaches at the Catholic University in Surabaya and Ciputra, Surabaya. So he keeps his academic hands involved and his activism. In fact, he was just telling me this morning about some very interesting developments going on. And now turning to Gina. Gina has just a stellar career in journalism. She is from Singapore originally. She actually became eventually the editor of the South China Morning Post, and then this executive editor of Reuters, and now she's a senior editor.
Executive editor. It's a meaningless title. They pay me in titles, not money.
At Semaphore, which is a very vibrant, quite astounding, its growth, online publication. And I highly recommend signing up. A lot of their newsletters are available. The media one on Sunday nights, I pay particular attention to. Ben Smith is one of the founders of Semaphore. Anyway, it's great. So we couldn't have more interesting people gathered around the table, but to listen to Dede and Gina. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay. I feel like a huge disadvantage because all of you clearly know each other and I don't. So I suspect that the best thing is that we talk for 3 minutes and then we get it over to you and you all have like a nice conversation.
Right.
But we'll get there. And the only other thing I would say is like, I know no one else who can show up in February in New York dressed like you were. Into like a Jakarta. I don't know. That's not how I think about the weather. Okay, so let's, you all know his background, you know his history, so we're not gonna go over that. But if you want to know more, you can certainly talk a lot more. Yeah, but I did want to start with a biographical question, which is sort of framed a little bit around the idea that you had to make a journey.
Yes.
Metaphysical, metaphorical, and physical before you came out. And obviously you knew what your sexual orientation was, you knew what you were interested in, and yet you waited until you came to Cornell to come out. So I'm curious about how much that distance from home, that newness of a place, that fresh start, how much that influenced you? How much how your life might have been different if you had made a decision earlier or later?
Well, it's good that you mentioned this as a journey, and the journey started in 1974 when I said, I'm tired of all this stress and worrying, and I want to do something. And I thought, okay, this is at the same year as the American Psychiatric Association decision, right? That homosexuality is not, the DSM-3, I think it was. So, well, I'll see a psychologist, and so I did in Surabaya. Thankfully, the psychologist had no electrodes, and so and no plan to lobotomize me. He gave me readings, and the more I read, the more I said, "There's nothing wrong with me." And and then my parents and my kind of second set of parents, my aunt and uncle, they found out. I mean, I kind of came out to them, and they said, "Okay, sure, we'll be with you. You're still our son, our nephew, and just tell us what we can support."
That's surprising.
Yes and no. I mean, well, now of course I have the advantage of having. That was 50 years ago. But now I'm not surprised. Actually, I could share a bit. Say my maternal. I mean, those of you who know Chinese culture, this is sacrilegious. My maternal grandfather, as he was dying, told my grandmother and my mother, get rid of the family altar. You will not be able to keep it. Give all the vessels to the temple. Don't desecrate the ashes. These are not human ashes. They're the ashes of the justice. And you won't be able to keep it anyway. So I'm descended from people who have left traditional culture. On my father's side, my grandmother and grandfather were converted into Pentecostalism by African American missionaries from the Bible Belt. So there's my first, or at least my family's contact with America. And so, being Pentecostal, they cannot wear joysticks, they cannot have family altars. And also, my paternal grandfather ran away because he lost all his fortune after getting married. In 2 months, he lost all his fortune on a gambling spree, typical Chinese story. And then because of the Pentecostalism, my grandmother said, if God loves me, I will not need medicine. So I'll throw them away. God, please heal me. Well, somehow God forgot, or he was busy with something else. She died. My father never forgave the church. He left. He was in the church band, playing a big band, Hawaiian and everything. He left. My mother, don't be offended, those of you who are religious, thought that religion is for kids. You grow up, you grow out of it. So, I have that luxury. Although now, looking at people who are religious, I won't go into detail unless you're interested. I could give example. Can come out within an Islamic framework, a Christian framework, even a Catholic framework. Yeah. So that's yeah. So
why didn't you come out when you were in Surabaya?
Well,
I mean, you had support.
Well, I came out seeing that I could change, right? I still believed I could change, and then as I saw, the epiphany was actually when I read that Time magazine issue with Sergeant Matlovich sometime in '76. That there's nothing wrong. I want to go to San Francisco. I want to march on Pride. But well, as a regular Indonesian kid, was kind of malu, shy, embarrassed. But it's just there. I got to Ithaca. The first day I saw, Cornell gave people, poster. But I waited. The thing that actually finally pushed me, and the distance actually helped, was that I kept having these crushes. The power of love. So I finally said, listen. And one winter, that's why I was willing to come in February. One winter evening, probably like few nights before Christmas, I found some of you might actually know Jeffrey Sung, who studied at Cornell together with me. Anyway, he was my roommate, and he had gone into some retreat with the Quakers somewhere near Philadelphia, and there was a pamphlet, what to do if you're homosexual and a Christian. I read that and said, well, I've been so stupid. I'm coming out. So I started telling, my friend, some of you might know Ismet Fanani. He was actually one of the first people I told. But this is different. Then I wrote, okay, there's the distance. I wrote to everyone on my Christmas card list. I am born again. I'm free. Please accept me as I am. Only 2 women didn't not accept me, but apparently they had crushes on me. So they were like, one of them is actually in touch with me every morning. So the distance helped.
Okay.
The fact that I came from an untraditional background helped. And with my parents, when I finally wrote to them, there was just one more letter. Are you sure? I said, yes, I'm sure. Okay, as long as you're happy.
I will say, by the way, you're the first, I think, and only person that's ever cited Time magazine as a huge, important cultural influence in their life. You do you. It's okay. So as I move a little bit from distance and into language.
Mhm. Ah,
So, you know, you talk about the things you read and the words that could come, especially when you were much younger and, you know, essentially you have like, what is this, right?
mhm,
And I
mhm.
have
Of
friends
course.
who have sort of sat and, you know, and very, very Catholic friends have sort of said, you know, go home and pray, you know, that this would go away, did not know the meaning.
Mhm.
And so partly I wanted to, you know, and certainly say in the trans community, everything has gone from, you know, transvestite, cross-dresser,
right.
transsexual, trans is a much broader thing, gender non-conforming, and so, and part of this sort of the notion that words and the naming of things give you power,
Mhm.
and at the same time constrict you, right? And so I'm really curious
yeah,
about how that has affected your conception of yourself.
Well, first the empowering effect of words. Yeah. So I learned the word homosexual or homosexual probably in the 60s from magazines. When I was in high school, I was in a boys' school, Catholic boys' school, and the headmaster, without being provoked, would actually condemn homosexuals and always mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah, and always quoted Paul, his letter to, I can't remember. Yeah. So, but I guess I was lucky. I knew how to filter the negative ones. You know, I'm not a masochist. I was not a masochist. I don't. If it's negative, yeah, I don't like it. But I wasn't sure, right? So when I discovered, you know, after reading the Time magazine, but there's also a book that I remember up until now, a 1967 book by Wainwright Churchill called Homosexual Behavior in Males. And that also opened my mind. So it's actually language in the terms of, you know, the way that, I guess it's discourse, the way homosexuality was discussed as it's just part of human diversity or human variation. And then of course the word gay.
Correct.
The word gay, and I remember when I wrote those Christmas cards to everyone, about 80 of them. You know, I'm post-Catholic, right? So I mean, I still, you know, I love the church, but I still, you know, I respect people who celebrate Christmas. So I actually, you know, I've always had this teacher in me. So I taught them there is this new word, G-A-Y, and it's neutral. It's actually, you know, and also the word pride. That is new. I mean, I haven't even gone to a pride march first yet. First one was actually 1980 in San Francisco. But anyway, I mean, if you're interested, we can talk about pride. But so yeah, gay pride. And then I was thinking, you know, as I was preparing for the conference in GWU and this, what is this about organizing? And this is where I'm going to be stereotypical. The Chinese of Indonesia have been accused of always, you know, there is arisan this and there is funerary association, which scared the hell out of my Japanese friends. It's morbid. Hey, when you prepare for your funeral, right? So, hey, why not a gay association? So I joined Cornell, gay people at Cornell, and immediately I happened to, actually, it had connection with New York. I happened to host an alumnus from here called Bob Roth, who's a lawyer, who unfortunately I later found that, you know, died of AIDS complications. But Bob actually told me, hey, if two people, and by the time I started writing, because since I was in high school, actually, I was already writing in publications in Surabaya. So and people would write to me, and the editors would forward, not forward, but they would actually put in an envelope and would send it to me. So so if there are two men in Solo, why don't you offer to put them in touch? And that was the start of the organization. So by fast forward to 82, 1st of March, I with two friends in one in Solo, one in Jakarta, we founded Lambda Indonesia. So again, the Lambda part. So, because Lambda Lambda, Lambda this, Lambda, yeah. So this language, I'm very conscious of that, and
I'm going to come to organizing in a
Right.
second, but let me stay on language for a while. So I just first will say I'm monolingual and not that good at English to begin with. I can swear in Tagalog and a bunch of other languages, but not. But I'm fascinated by the idea of how language changes. So I don't speak Bahasa. I can't. But I'm really interested in how the concepts of sexual orientation, of gender identity are expressed in different languages and how that changes. And I just, as a sort of digression, I have a non-binary friend who's Japanese, and we've had a long conversation. In fact, they wound up doing a really good graphic for Reuters. If you ever want to Google it, it's Gender and Language.
Okay.
About how language constrains and opens your mind. And my question was, how do you say the singular they in Japanese, which apparently you can't. And as part of that work was in certain languages, and I'm going to mix this one up, either in Spanish or German, who knows, where you cannot say as a man, I love a man. In other words, the sentence construction doesn't allow you to do that.
Really?
You have to say I, comma, a man, love, Joe, comma, a man, because otherwise the gender construction blows it up. And so there's a lot of work being done on gendered language and what it does and doesn't allow you to do. So I'm really interested. Does Bahasa have any issues?
Well, when I came out, of course, I didn't know about these things, but one evening I was in the alun-alun of Yogyakarta. To be honest, I was looking for men. I didn't get any. I was. I didn't get any. I'm not good at cruising. So, but then on the way back to my hotel and behind my lost men behind Hotel Tiara, I saw this really, tired trans woman, Waria. And I struck up a conversation, and she's like, "Can I stay with you?" Sure. There's an extra bed in my room, and so she taught me the trans/gay slang, spoken at that time. This was 1981. So again, so that's how I. And I guess my training in linguistics actually teaches me that, well, there is the formal, homosexual and whatever, and there's gay, which is a movement thing, but there's also the, what is it, lekong for lucky, and which quickly became my home language, because by then, and then I found I met my first partner, and until now, he's an ex by now, by the way, we still use that language, plus the later slangs. There have been, later iterations. The ones coming in the more recent ones are actually very creative. Those of you who know Indonesian, you used to see somebody who's ugly, jelita. Jelita means pretty, but in trans/gay slang, it means ugly. I know it's vicious, it's cruel. So that, and actually, I'm glad you brought this up, Gina. Margaret actually reminded me of this. My first ex is a street smart person. I'm a homebody, nerd. So he actually taught me to live in the streets. I was rounded up by police twice. The police was actually shocked. Bapak dosen ada apa? Well, you Dr. Oetomo, what are you doing in the street? Oh, what are you doing rounding me up? So anyway,
Reset though.
Of course. So yeah, I learned all these possibilities, and this is where I combine it with my kind of academic position, and by the mid-80s, postmodernism, post-structuralism were popular. And so, I started learning about waria tomboy, a tomboy trans woman, which means that, you transition, but you transition into a tomboy, the butch waria, and things like that. So I think I wrote a piece in I think it was 1991 for a conference in Seattle. And I basically mapped out and using. I must confess I'm only fluent in the Java and Jakarta slang, because there's Banjarmasin slang, there's Riau slang, there's Makassar slang of the trans/K variety, which I don't understand. But they actually provide, and then so I actually never read History of Sexuality. I have to confess, Michel Foucault. But I learned about his ideas in the streets, being touched all over by these trans women friends.
I want to follow up. I will get to the organizing. I want to follow because that's a fact. But I will one very quick digression. I just really separately because I am actually trying to explore this myself as a there's a woman, and again I have no idea how good the research is, who's done research where essentially for those of you who speak Spanish, the Spanish bridges are masculine in Spanish, but they're feminine in German.
Okay.
And if you give German speakers, and if you give bilingual German and German English, Spanish English, you give them a picture of a bridge and you ask them to describe it. The Germans will use feminine words. The bridge is beautiful, it's elegant. And if you ask Spanish people, they will say it's strong and it's sturdy. And it's a very interesting way of how language hinges on your brain. I'm really fascinated by that. That's a digression. I want to go back to your exposition. And again, the analogy for me is, when I was growing up, I thought there were two teams. I wanted to play on the other team. Finally got there, and I realized that in fact teams don't matter, and teams have become much more expensive. So, can you walk through a little bit of what your conception of what the community was like, and then your
the gate/trans.
Correct, before you walked into it, and then you walked into it, and I would love to get both your pre and post.
Okay, I grew up with trans women performers in Ludruk, certainly, but also in Japanese dance.
And it's very customary, right? It's traditional in some ways.
But with all due respect to trans people, I'm not that. But yeah, although when I came out first, one of the first acts I did in Ithaca was actually I went to a shop and bought some makeup. So in my conception between, which is actually the conception of the lay people in Indonesia also, between gay and trans, they're the same.
Could you just unpick that for a second? Like what not what were you thinking in that way, but like what were you thinking when you did that?
Well, I thought, I needed to be a bit more feminine. I mean, because I do have a feminine gender expression somehow, which these things. I mean, if you measure, I'm probably terrible at the feminine gender expression. But I tried, and then it's actually some of you actually know Abby Ruddick. It was Abby who actually told me, "You look ugly as a transvestite." Okay, so I stopped. I have no grudge, but I don't want to say too much. But I think this is the good point to actually bring Ben Anderson.
Okay.
So I was, reading all this gay liberation literature, and he was actually, he actually was kind enough to write, again, distance. I was in Pasuruan doing collecting data for my dissertation, and Ben, in addition to the advice about field work and everything, would like, Dede, you should look at your own people's past. And so we had these arguments. And he reminded me, look at the past, look at the Warok Gembelaan in Ponorogo, look at the Bedoyo dancers of Yogyakarta in the 19th century, because they have to be boys, but they have to be cross-dressed, do cross-dressing and things like that. And actually, I was brazen enough to actually argue with him, but Pa, you cannot, not everybody can go back being a Warok. Or not everybody can be a Bedoyo dancer. And as much as, Pakubuwono X supposedly had these boys, you are not, I'm not Pakubuwono X. That was actually,
one of the few arguments that Benenson lost.
No, actually, yeah, eventually, when this was like fast forward about 20 years, I published a collection of my writings, and he actually was kind enough to write the foreword, and there we actually reconciled. That of course there is the layer of the likes, the gym boys, if they're gay, or the lesbians who always look for foreign partners and things like that. And their dream is to live in New York or to live in Sydney and Amsterdam. There's that layer. There's people like me who we're happy enough to stay, and there's the activists and there's non-activists, and it's quite complex, but that's there. But there's also people who still live like the old ways. Actually, my own partner right now is like that. And of course, when you meet in bed, and it doesn't really matter. And he's smart enough to also ask me questions about how does it feel to have this identity. He respects me for having an identity or for being an activist, but he's not going to come to my office, for example. That kind of thing, yeah. But he's the old, and that actually just quickly why after Lambda Indonesia kind of fizzled, a bunch of us founded Gaya Nusantara. This is Nusantara.
Tell us about the name.
Nusantara is another name for Indonesia. Forget the capital, which is also the new capital of Indonesia. But Nusantara, before the capital, is actually a more cultural, non-political, non-state name for Indonesia, and so it's actually a show of respect for tradition. And I, thanks to Pa Ben, I got his entire collection of index cards with notes about all kinds of things. Photocopies from the Achenese, Chronia, photocopies of articles that were submitted to Indonesia Journal but was never published, unlike Ponorogo, and they taught me, to know these traditional manifestations, and they're amazing. And even recently, I got from Saskia Wieringa that if people say that marriage equality is not Indonesian, hello, there was marriage equality amongst Toraja and amongst the Dai.
So we will get to political as well. But no. But now we're thinking we got to the activism. So why did you become an activist?
That's
We have time.
I was talking about this with Margaret this morning. Again, the stereotype, of organizing, but I come, in a line of people who are community leaders. My grandfather on my father's side had to give the speech to the incoming Japanese troops in Kadiri, having lost his son, my uncle, a few days. It's I think it's an unenviable position. What if you say the wrong thing, right? But he did well, apparently. My father was also kind of close to the PNI, until, of course, it was decimated by Soeharto, and then he became cynical. So becoming community leaders was just someone comes naturally.
But you could have been a community leader in anything. You chose this.
Yeah, because see this. Okay, in my family there is a tradition of arguments, almost like Indians, but not as vicious. So just an
That one gets cut from the tape.
Okay. Okay. For example, my father would be Sukarnoist, right? And my grandmother would be an admirer of the Huda Oude Tijds, the good old times. And they would argue. And my father would say, wow, Sukarno came with this idea of Danepo and Asian Games, and then, tukang kawin, a womanizer. And I was exposed to it. And also my aunts and uncles on the other side, they were Catholic. So I was used to this diversity within the family. And we are used to correct each other for facts. And, what is the capital of the Netherlands? It's Amsterdam. No, it's The Hague, and no bad feelings. So when I keep hearing that it is, that homosexuality is a mental disorder, it's a disease, I was tempted to write first letters to the editor, and they were published by Tempo, by Surabaya Post, by Sinar Harapan. Kompas was a bit shy, and that's how I got the first correspondence. Yeah. So it's bottom line is that I don't think that gay men, lesbians, trans people are being treated fairly. So the key word again, language may be fair, adil, and that is very strong. I guess it was the closest. I mean, I was sort of up to at least 2010 maybe, sort of a leader in the Chinese community in Surabaya. But I'm a funny Chinese anyway because I'm Peranakan, mixed blood, and then I don't well, my Mandarin Chinese is atrocious. My Hokkien is limited, but the Chinese-speaking gentleman was for my age. I said, but at least you defend Chinese culture. You defended Chinese culture during the Soeharto years. I refused to say China and write China, which is like Chink in English. I would write Tionghoa, Tiongkok, and I always was asked by Surabaya Post, which actually is a Pribumi-owned, non-Chinese owned newspaper, to write a column for Chinese New Year. And I dared to say, it's unfair. This is cultural violation of cultural rights. Yeah. So I was the leader in the Chinese community. And then of course the media kind of, I'm not blaming it. The media kind of, after Reformasi, anybody can speak with the Chinese, but not very many people can speak about being queer or trans. And well, now there are many more people actually that could do that. Although the mainstream media now would not interview queer and trans people, source people. Yeah.
It's just a quick read about the use of Gina and so on. That is another example of the power of language and the attempt to define people.
And I don't know. I think I was raised to, if a regulation or a moral whatever doctrine makes sense, yes, follow it. This is what I was taught. But if it doesn't, you have to disobey. But be careful. So, yeah. So, banned books, we would actually, my father and me and my mother, we would hide the books. Banned records, the Beatles, Elvis, Ricky Nelson, we would hide them. So, because it's not fair, it doesn't make sense, Yeah.
So we're going through, I think, a different moment again of this, and as Margaret has noted, in 2016, there was that report about, so perhaps you can
Mhm.
reflect a little on sort of that, first of all, just the historical journey from, the 60s through the 80s, 90s, and then now in Indonesia, and then talk a little bit about how you see that as a global.
Indonesia is interesting because, I mean, there is a book, those of you who don't know yet, I mean, there is a book by Ben Hegarty called The Made Up State, which is basically the history of all these concepts, it's Banci, Bencong, Waria, Wadam, Waria, and then the latest is Transpuan, with all the implications, right? So that book actually confirms that Ben actually shared with me that in 1961, the Parliament of Jakarta, the City Council of Jakarta, was debating or discussing a bill for the elevation of the lives of, I guess in English it would be transvestites, still the old word, 61. And in 68, the then mayor of Jakarta, or governor of Jakarta, Ali Sadikin, who's a Marine general, got a visit from a delegation of trans women, but by that time they were called, they were still called Banci. And he listened. It's useful that the rumor for example, from Ben is that he's gay, but I don't know. Some people say he's not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he actually said, "Wow, this is terrible. You get rounded up. You get, some people beat you up in Taman Lawang. Those are Jakarta, which is still the trans hangout. Okay, we have Jakarta Fair. I give you the stage. Perform, your shows." And that's not it. And I think Ben didn't know. Charlie, you might know actually. Then the word Wadam came, Wanita Adam women. And then just quickly, 1980, the Majlis Ulama, the Ulama Council, objected because Adam Islam is a prophet. And so, do not desecrate the name of a prophet, make it just Waria. And then it had to be approved by Suharto himself. It was so. Anyway, I'll stop there for that. But then when we started the gay movement, and then the lesbians started the lesbian movement. By the way, Saskia Wieringa just published a book on which I haven't read actually, on the history of lesbian organizing. So about the same time, the 80s. We were seen as funny, but there was no homophobic statements or just about anybody. If anything, the people. Okay, let me just mention the media publications like Tempo, like the Tempo Group. They would give us like 10 pages sometimes of including traditional homosexuality essays. Nothing negative. I once met those of you who know Indonesia know Gunawan Muhammad, one of the founders of Tempo. I once asked him, why did you come for us? We were just like three of us. A small group with a magazine with a circulation of 200. Hey, you are so crazy. You are news. You're the media people. So Tempo helped in many ways. At my university, the dean couldn't say anything when I said, but if Tempo calls, you don't say no. It's like, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, and personally, and then my father, from being a bit ashamed of having a gay son, I said, wow, Tempo is calling you. I have to be proud of you. So, you know, it helped. So 80s was actually easy. HIV came, actually, I have to credit the Ministry of Health. The first NGO delegation to the WHO in Delhi, the Indonesian delegation was the only one with a gay man. Moi. But the honeymoon only lasted about, let's say about 4 years. And then the homophobes with the Ministry of Health said, this is dangerous, because they saw that the consultants from the US, from Australia, from Europe, you know, the HIV work in the West, was full of gay men, right? I mean, not all, but they were afraid this is going to be used by these people to promote, you know, which we did. So there's a hiatus of about 5 years. It took the stepping aside of Suharto that I could actually go to the Ministry of Health. I could point at the directors general and say, you know, how many people have died because you did not allow us to have a program? And they, you know, and I was with the students at the time. So one of my reputation is that I was part of the of getting rid of the president. I mean, I know this is all delusional almost, but those days, hey. So in the 90s it was fine, you know. Actually, under Gus Dur, of course, it was fine. The Gus Dur presidency was wonderful. Okay, we have to be careful. If you're trans, especially trans women, in the streets of anywhere in Indonesia, you are a target for, you know, young men who are drunk and would like to shoot you with an arrow. Happened to Makassar. Somebody lost their eye, and things like that. I don't want to go through some details, but basically, the government actually said, okay, we'll do something in the name of HIV. And then when Megawati came to power as president, you know her brother is gay, Mas Guru, well, Guru didn't do anything, but there was the 5-year human rights strategic plan, and we were mentioned as a vulnerable group, and there were actually workshops, and in fact there was a paper that said that the marriage law of 1974 was unconstitutional, because the Constitution said every citizen has the right to form a family, not every person. So, well, but you know, but soon, you know, but Reformasi also brought the negative conservative voices. So, you know, by 99, we were attacked in Solo. 2000, we were attacked in Kaliurang and in Yogyakarta as organizations. But you know, but at least the government was there. SBY could still open the AIDS conference, Asia Pacific AIDS conference in Bali in 2009, and could actually mention, you know, we have to, in English, we have to defend and promote the rights of men who have sex offended, sex workers, drug users. You know who wrote the speech? Ibu Nafsia Moy. Ibu Nafsia is interesting because she's like an army wife. Her husband was pretty high up in the army hierarchy and was actually the superior of SBY. So she could say, Dick, you know, hey, little brother, you say this. Okay, boo, okay, boo. So she used it. I mean, and so this is where we get into the ugly, I mean, you know, whatever we call it. Some people call it the tsunami of hatred. Some people call it, you know, a moral panic. which I think it was Kyle, right, Margaret, who thought that this might be a state intelligence agency program.
Mhm.
Defense University started developing the discourse that LGBT are more dangerous than nuclear weapons, and it's bad for the nation. And that was 2015, 2016. And now, as I said, mainstream media cannot, feature people like me and other activists. But thankfully, there are alternative medias like Tirto and Umparan, and now there's also feminist alternative media like Magdalene and what is it? Conde. Conde is actually one, which in a way it's also a fight against the veiling of women. So I want to show my fun. so it's I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be too optimistic, but it's a war. I mean, Dennis Altman published that book Queer Wars about 10 years ago, and there's a war now. And I said it's all over the world. I mean, this country, and we collaborated with Outright in Eastern Indonesia. Had to be suspended in Eastern Indonesia, and people are challenging it. I mean, also in Indonesia, civil scene.
So I am going to follow up with something optimistic at the end of it, but
Okay.
but we'll leave it to the end so we can end on a happier note. But I think I've monopolized you long enough, so we should probably just
Okay,
open up
sure.
and see if there are any questions. And Margaret, if there's anybody from the
Yeah,
line you might want to be able
I
to
just went on to see if I could master this, but it's actually Emily is the tech person. If there's questions online, are there?
Not at the moment.
Not at the
But I'll
moment.
open it. Go.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's thinking, like, what is the rhetoric out of the US? Like, what's the impact of this enormous shift that's happening in the world that didn't start, 2.5 weeks ago, but that's ongoing?
Yeah.
Like, how do you see the impact on Indonesia?
Well, interestingly, actually, it's small parts of money. Under Trump Volume 1, we still got money from the Surabaya Consulate General, which whose jurisdiction includes East Indonesia. So in fact, we opened the Outright project for East Indonesia with that from Surabaya, still under Trump and Pompeo. Well, then came Biden, because things got much better, but still, not large parts of money, but at least, there's it. So now, the past 2.5 weeks, well, the first shock, at least for us in Gina Nusantara, is it's suspended, and then there's news about PEPFAR being suspended also, and honestly, that this is what is interesting. It actually became very personal because my partner is HIV positive. Would you get this? And I try not to be nepotistic, but I finally had to check with, because I'm on the board of the Indonesia AIDS Coalition. I checked with Edo, the executive. Edo, what's the status of drugs? Well, thankfully we get it from the Global Fund, so Indonesia is all right. But the TB program has suffered, is suffering, and reproductive health finished, but in Indonesia you tend to get money from different sources anyway. So I was please, I'm going to be vague, and because this is off the record. Well, on the 1st of February there was a raid in a Jakarta hotel. So 56 men were arrested, and the police came with a TV crew terrible. And then three men who were the organizers were charged with organizing an orgy, which some vague article of the pornography law. But the 53 men were released. But see, this is where I think it's awful. They called the mothers or the wives of these men and please pick up your men. I think the rest of the story I'll tell you when we come to because it is optimistic. Yes.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up because I'd like to hear from both of you about this global phobia and actual limiting of rights in policy too. There are many different explanations for it, and I'd love to hear how you guys view it, because in Indonesia's case, often it has been termed, these are Western poisonous ideas that are contaminating us coming in. And of course, that eclipses the long history of tolerance, and that there was a great variety in way of living in Indonesia on sexuality and identity. How do you view that? Because it actually goes back to your debate with Anderson, because it's how to live as a modern citizen that you want rights for. And Anderson will pay attention to the glorious tradition, which doesn't get you very far in the modern day. But for Gina, in the United States, it seems a much more politically targeted at trans. Perhaps the impetus was the same-sex marriage law, but it is totally moved to trans. And why do you think that is? And how does it feel to live with that?
It's interesting. We go back to Kishore and Asian values. If you want to really go back to sort of questions about importation of dangerous ideas from the West. I mean, I think there's a sort of a clear political motive, but it is a broader one. So just the straight up political motive is it's easy. We're very small. Nobody knows who we are. 0.6% of the population. Maybe 5% of kids are more questioning one way or the other, as opposed to sort of necessarily being straight up trans, or at least essentially, as I said, two teams. I don't want to play this game, and that sparks fear with parents. And so I think if you go through the history of the attempts, those bathrooms that didn't work, then it was sports, and that didn't work very well, and then it was and it's sort of they've gone full circle, and they finally come back to kids, which did start to work, and then sports. And you can look at the polling and you can see how trust me, it's a long and difficult tale that has been enabled by a lot of the frankly the progressive media narrative as well, which is something that we've been trying to work on. But I think the thing that I would come back to is Marsha Gessen has probably one of the best single explanations for this, which is when you have authoritarian governments or authoritarian tendencies, you want, much of it is built around hopping to an imagined past. And that easier, and it resonates for people who have uncertainty about the speed of the world, uncertainty about the speed of the change of hierarchies and roles in society, of technology, all of that. I mean, there is a ton of uncertainty in the world driven by all sorts of things, globalization, AI. It's entirely fair for people to feel very uncertain about where their place is in the world, and you want to be able to promise them that I can take you back to the world where you remember it to be better, even if it wasn't. And and they've attempted to use various shorthands, but there is no single better shorthand than trans people. Because what is this, right? And so you can knock off all of the things that just immediately stick your brain. It's a subliminal but very powerful line, and I'm not at all surprised that they use it. And honestly, I think if I just take my hat off for a second and look at it as a political scientist, boy, it works really well, because it works really well. It works really well all around the world. And that's my 2 cents, well, it's Martha's 2 cents on what's working. Martha's probably one of the smartest thinkers about this. What do you think?
Well, in Indonesia, it's a bit different. I mean, on the surface, it looks the same, right? And in the preparation for this conversation, I've had this idea. Actually, I got it from people like Dédé Oetomo in Australia, from the late Douglas Sanders, who's a Canadian who lived in Bangkok and tried to explain it. In South and Southeast Asia and the Pacific, being trans is more acceptable.
Yeah.
Not many people know that Pakistan and Bangladesh have a place for trans people. You know, I mean, it's not perfect. If you're a trans woman in Islamabad, you can still be killed. But at least you know, you got services, you can run for office. The whatever identities that were seen as from the West and as dangerous and, you know, more dangerous than nuclear war is the LGBT. And it was like, this is terrible. Now, again, I'm quoting Saskia Wieringa, who says that this is all due to what she calls historical amnesia. So let me go to South Sulawesi for a while, because there, you know, if the bupati, you know, the district head, or the vice governor, the governor, are kind of, you know, not really Islamist, they would invite the bisu, you know, the gender ritual practice, ritual specialist, you know, and all that. But if the police chief in Borneo, for example, which is actually the heartland of the Bisu people, is Islamist, God help them. So they would be rounded up. And there is a history of this. In the 50s, the separatist movement led by Kahar Muzaka, you know, told the Chalabai, the trans women, you return being a man or we kill you. And some did return to be men. Others went into the forest, and then some were killed. And in '65, I mean, we don't know the numbers. I have a sense that some Bisu were killed as being pre-Islamic, meaning kafir, meaning communist. Yeah, which also happened in East Java with the Barak, but that's something else. Yeah. So so there's this confusion actually, and you know, actually thanks to the Outright Project in Indonesia, we learned that Indonesia is not monolithic. Aceh is the worst. West Sumatra is trying to be like Aceh. West Java is not nice. Jakarta is actually pretty bad. But Ternate is pretty good. Gorontalo, a trans woman can actually point a finger at the chief Muslim scholar. Sir, wear a dress for a day and go to the streets, and you will understand our issue, our life. So the Japanese trans women are very polite, and there are surprises. You know, Nia Dinata, one of our filmmakers, is actually making a movie about Raminten. Raminten is an institution in Yogyakarta, those of you where you have drag shows, and the performers are not necessarily transgender or non-binary. They may be just dance students from the local Institute of the Arts, you know, from EC. And it seems to survive. It has never been attacked. And as far as we know, they don't pay bribes to the police or to the Preman or to the Islamist, you know, vigilantes. So I don't know. Jogja is something. Solo is something else. You know more. Charlie acted.
In Southeast Asia, it's all over the place, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Singapore repealed 378.
But something that I actually learned from Chaley Barry, you know, another Cornell alumna, is that it could be in Indonesia. It could be religion. And so it's these people who use the Islamist discourse may not be really Muslim. I mean, if they're real Muslim, they're not going to embezzle the money, right? Right?
So, but could I? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah,
Could I follow, because you
Sure,
said
sure.
an important term, which was, you said moral panic, I would say moral crisis.
okay.
This is an old pattern in Indonesia. So this is a pattern from the 1950s, and it was all gendered. The story in 1965 that was used to justify the killing of Indonesians was about communist women who had gone too far,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. That 1961 stuff in Jakarta was part of a campaign about what was proper dress that could happen in public, and the trans women created this different issue because they were often showgirls, and that was okay, or they were prostitutes. So for prostitutes, it was okay because they were already immoral women, right? So they could have a short skirt, but a good woman couldn't. So this, and there, the outside issue was Hollywood films and kissing and all these sort of stuff. So you have this well-trod pattern in Indonesian nationalism and modernity. I think your modernity thing is right on. As people are not feeling comfortable, right? The more conservative and more authoritarian forces go to moral crisis, and that's the whole basis again of the idea of state egoism from
Julia, sure.
Sumo, that you have to go into these proper gendered roles to make sure that women actually in some ways can still be strong in Indonesia, because women are strong in Indonesia relatively speaking. So but moral crisis is just this. It was used by the Dutch in the 1920s. It was learned very well.
Right.
So because in the 1920s there was an entire. In 1910, if you had a Dutch man and an Indonesian man in Bali and they had sex, it was not a problem. By 1921, it's a national crisis from the nationalists. This was so there's this revolving history of moral crisis being the way. So right now, LGBT is, as I say, my dissertation is like one of the major ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just a follow-up question,
Sure.
because you mentioned religion.
Right.
I mean, clearly we all know that religion is the elephant in the room when we're talking about, especially in the case of Indonesia. I wonder, in the past 43 years since Lambda, what kind of, what strategies you've done with your organization, or perhaps other organizations that also advocate for trans and gay rights, to address this religious question. And I actually, I think about a very specific thing as well. In 2009, I followed for 2 months in Jogja this trans and gay pesantren, pesantren waria. So pesantren is an Islamic boarding school. They don't actually live there, but they learn religions and all that. But what's really interesting to me is that they are not brave enough, at the time at least, Bu Mariati was the founder, they're not brave enough to challenge Islamic teaching. So when they pray, they have to choose whether they want to be a man or they want to be a woman. They can't be their true trans identity. As I was following, I was doing a documentary at the time, and it never actually became a film. I still have it in the archive. But what's really interesting is as I followed their life, actually, it wasn't, their demand is not just about religious rights in terms of interpretation of the Quran, but actually much simpler thing, the economy. Because they're actually really poor. These are ordinary LGBTQ people. So they are alienated from the society. They couldn't have an ID card. There is no bathroom for them. They have to live in the same place. So I was just wondering, in that 42 years, what kind of programs you've done? Maybe do you work with like a more progressive Islamic organization? Do they try to change some interpretation, advocate, things like that? And also other programs that are not. I was just thinking, when comes to NGO, we are often dictated by the NGO's program, the funders program, right? Like AIDS. Yeah, those are important. But what are some of the things that come from the ordinary people's needs in those 42 years?
Actually, where do we start? I mean, okay. By the time it was Gaya Nusantara, there were queer religious leaders. There was the late Ruder Aquino from Boawai in Flores, who would write his letters to Catholic, queer, and trans people. We will publish them. Yeah. So it started small. So I think the kind of big name scholar that started challenging interpretation was Ibu Musda Mulia. Hussein kind of shyly and carefully challenged that, but Ibu Musda was clear. The story of Lot is, number one, it's not about just anal sex, that is consensual. It's about rape. That's one of her interpretation. The other one is Allah cannot be so cruel that the babies are also, decimated in the decimation of in Islam. There's no name for the city of Lot. So of course she was vilified, a Zionist agent of and it didn't help us. I think she got some medal from some U.S. organization, but she's still around, and in a more intersectional way, she has this program of training young Muslim reformist Muslim girls, actually, and they're very young, and diversity and SOGSC, so sexual orientation, identity, and expression, and sexuality is mentioned explicitly. So unless you belong to a rabidly hateful organization, these people are actually at least more tolerant, if not accepting. And again, so there's that. And early on, when I started and reading those index cards from Ben and all that, I learned, and also from my good neighbor Dani in Pasuruan, I learned about the sex between boys and between girls in the pesantren, not the pesantren Al-Fatah, which at one point got me into trouble because I said it on TV. Yeah, but that's something else. So just quickly, now there are even queer and trans Muslim scholars, young ones, Amar Al-Fikar, Fahmi, I can't remember. And actually within the Partai Hijau Indonesia, there are santri, young men and young women and young trans men and young trans women who also is, conscious about the environment. I mean, it is a small party, but this is, I'm an optimist, but Partai Hijau has a SOGI SC division. I don't know, maybe in the next election, who knows? But anyway, so there is it. But the key work is reinterpretation, getting those queer or trans people who are Muslim or Christian, for that matter, or whatever, who are brave enough, who are brave enough to testify in front of scholars. I actually witnessed something like this in Mojokerto. So this trans boy, I guess, because he was only like 15, was brave enough to tell the story, and the head guy of Mojokerto, of Majelis Ulama Indonesia, Mojokerto, well, child, Islam cannot punish you. This is your life. So I think he's all right now. So anyway, there are these things. I'd be happy to be proven wrong. It's still a minority voice. The Catholics in Jakarta have a Sahabat Yesus, a support group with the blessing of the Bishop of Jakarta, the Archbishop of Jakarta, Monsignor Suharyo. And okay, if you're willing to swallow your pride, or go by the discourse that you are like Jesus, homosexuality or transgender, your transgender whatever issue is your cross. But if you're Catholic, this rings a bell. I know, that doesn't ring up. But and then activists like me, we try to be nice to everyone because it's useful. And actually, there have been he was at one point, thanks to the Dutch government, had two programs for this. And the problem is that, of course, when we do these workshops, we have to do it underground. And either the media doesn't want to cover, or we don't know. If we have it covered, that's the end of the program. Also the NLP boss maybe, or because they're breaking the law. Yeah. So anyway, and it's growing.
There's a major movement right now among feminist ulama to overturn the sunatan, female circumcision, stuff like that. And the women running that are also being fairly inclusive.
Charlie, with all due respect to the KUPI, the Congress Ulama Perempuan Indonesia, when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues, jangan dulu,
These Marcos is using it.
Lisa is an exception.
Yeah, she is, but so in their training, when they talk about women, they're using inclusive.
Unfortunately, the Gus Durians, the movement that was set up by Ibu Sita Nuria and 4 daughters, at first they were okay, but only in Jombang and Surabaya and probably Malang. And then, and in fact, I think I'll say this, it's all right. We could be edited later. Amar, the trans man scholar, Muslim scholar, Amar Alfikar, was actually personal assistant to Ibu Sinta. And then, I don't know which daughter it is. They did, Ibu, this is not looking good. And this is where NO has very well the right. And there's reason to believe that there is influence from the United States.
So I want to be really conscious of time and the fact that people are probably hungry. Margaret, how are we doing?
So we have another easily 5 minutes. I see Meredith has a question, and we have a question online, and Andre.
Okay, so let's do.
Sorry, Andre, yes, has a question.
Can we pack all those questions together?
Sure.
And try to get one
Yeah.
answer. So let's go through questions.
So actually, first was a comment, which was the, you mentioned the environmental activist. and so
Yeah,
on. And so this is something that a group in Malaysia, I think, well, it's the person, Punky Tech in Malaysia is the one.
Oh,
I think it's Innovations for Change or something, the group.
Yeah.
They've just launched the initial findings from a project they've been working on. Commonwealth countries starting off, so Brunei, Malaysia, Fiji and so forth, on queer activists in other types of activist organizations.
Right.
And it's fantastic.
Wow.
So they're about to publish, they did an online launch then, so just, it's
Okay.
something to
Is
look
that gonna
out
be
for.
part of your work with Ed?
Not with Ed, no. Hung and I have talked about doing some other, it doesn't really,
Okay.
but but the question I had was really, so I'm, work more in Malaysia than in Indonesia, but there, with the, sort of following up on, questions about religion, in Indonesia, there's been such a turn towards criminalization, codification, and so forth. I was wondering if you could just extend the discussion of language a little bit more in terms of the phrases like LGBT, which are used in Malaysia in such ways that are useful, but also limiting in other ways, and also obscure the extent to which you may have gay men and lesbians working together. The B tends to be silent and absent or invisible.
True.
And then, for trans communities, the links with gay communities are not always so seamless. And so I'm wondering what sort of solidaristic breakdown or reinforcement you have with this turn towards legal codification, which tends to affect each of these communities quite differently and to codify in new ways.
Pop the thought.
Yeah.
Thanks, I'm Andre, I'm with Outright International. Dédé, I know you from ILGA
From ILGA,
times on international LGBTI work. Thanks for sharing your journey over the 40 years and also watching a shift from an open society to a closed society. And I know one of the wonderful things about the global LGBTI movement is that we share experiences
Right.
across boundaries. What would you say are the lessons, not just for this country, but for Argentina, for Uganda, for Germany, for the Netherlands, other places that are going through similar shifts? What do you look back and say, we did this and we did this well, and actually we didn't, or we did this, I would have done this differently? What can you tell us?
We have
Online.
one quick
Online,
question
yeah.
online. This is from Dede from Samara. They finished their master's degree. As a lecturer, they're asking, what do you think if institutions, like if they prohibit students from doing LGBT research? So I guess.
Oh, in Indonesia, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start with the last one because that's kind of easy. Yes, there are universities where if you teach about LGBT, or write a thesis or do research, it'll be there. It's like in the old days, or even until now, doing research on the 65 genocide. Yeah, so, but in other places, it's possible. Actually, with in my own at my own university, things have actually regressed. Although you have to disguise the research, but research is still possible. Doing a public event, even online, may actually raise the eyebrows of the Majelis Ulama, the Ulama Council, or the Islamic student caucus on campus. And when the rector, who is kind of Islamist anyway, for example, get a call from the Majelis Ulama, they are careful. Because if they're not careful, they will not be a minister in the next cabinet or something. So it's there. But and we have to admit that it's still limited, but there are surprises. And this is absolutely anecdotal. The sociology department at the Gajah Mada University has a required course on gender and sexuality for every student. So, but I think we can thank Ibu Wening Udasmara, who is the provost or vice rector, who is also a martial arts specialist. So if you come to her office and you two, I mean, she might just chop you with a karate chop. Anyway, no, but that's not.
Lessons and the different letters and
Yeah.
education.
Yeah. What lessons?
Lessons, what would you?
Oh, yeah,
What
from
would you do?
I think we did all right. I mean, we did what we could. I came from the American tradition of, act up and, stonewall. And sometimes I'm terrible sometimes. Hey, my sisters, trans women of Surabaya, don't you want to burn a policeman? So they don't do that. And who am I as a person to actually say that you should do this? So I said, over the 40 years, I've learned to be patient. So I don't think we did anything wrong. I keep telling younger activists we shouldn't feel guilty for this moral crisis or moral panic. It's from them. We should teach each other. And this morning I was talking with Margaret. I mean that there are many, actually not only queer and trans young people who are looking forward to moving to the West. Then now they are for them. You go to Germany, you get AfD. So and if you're working class, you go to Taiwan or Hong Kong. So I don't know. I don't want to sound too optimistic, but I don't think we did anything wrong. We could rely on the tradition of struggle, which we were taught from kindergarten to university, that if you don't like something, you struggle. And so these days, demonstrations to attract people, and the Kamisan, the Thursday afternoon demonstration in front of the President's Palace. I think it's gone for like 16 years, and it's still going on. So it's just that things are not perfect. For myself, I usually tell people, compare it to people like Sukarno and Tan Malaka, Hatta in the 30s. They were having it difficult too. Yeah. So anyway, anyway, so I'll stop there, and then from
Solidarity.
solidarity. Yeah.
And how the
Right.
changing legal context is shifting.
I think except for Jakarta, which is naked. In most places, they know when to work together, and they know when to let each other work in their own community. So yeah, I mean, and they try to respect each other.
But is the shift towards criminalization or efforts at this and sort of legal codification, is that change, is that making these things more difficult? In other words, because Indonesia was
people
one of the places in
learn.
which it
People
was.
learn. I can't give you the details because they asked me to be off the record, but there are 2 lawyer associations who are queer and trans. So there are probably about 30 practicing queer and trans lawyers right now, and they, lawyers, they love litigations. And this is new. This is new.
Perhaps in response.
So yeah, there are fights here and there, but when push comes to shove, people come together. And many of the feminists are actually welcoming. Women's March, there's always the rainbow flag, and these days it's becoming the progressive rainbow flag. People learn it. It's not rocket science. Yeah. So yeah.
We sadly have
Bang
a,
on 129. I'm just saying.
yeah, we have
Very good on this.
a hard stop at 1:30 because this room is going to be used.
And so.
But before
on.
we do that, I want to say thank you to both of you. We could have gone on for many more hours.
Hours. All right. Thank you.